It's in the news, it's everywhere. And you might already be aware that 97% of the Western United States is facing severe water scarcity, and Californians have been encouraged to cut down on their home water use. Here to talk about drought and water resources management in Alameda County is Mr. Ed Stevenson, the General Manager of the Alameda County Water District. He's a longtime ACWD employee whose work there over the past 25 years has spanned a variety of areas and disciplines. He's a professional engineer in the state of California and a member of various water agencies, including American Water Works, California Urban Water, CalDesal, a desalination group, among others. He's a longtime Bay Area resident who lives with his 3 kids and his wife. Hi, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Shreya. Thanks very much for having me. You've picked a pretty hot topic for these days, and I'm really thrilled to be joining you and share what Alameda County Water District is doing during these difficult days of drought.
So our first question is, the last major drought in California only really ended a couple of years ago, and we're still feeling the effects. Would you be able to share what your views are on the future of drought and water scarcity in California and maybe the US as a whole?
Yeah, in fact, some scientists suggest that maybe it's not that the last drought ended, but that we're really in a longer cycle of extremely dry weather called a mega drought. So I'll leave that to the scientists, though. What we do know is that California and the West are in a critically dry period now. And in fact, the last few years have been dry. This is really the second of the most sort of the driest years on the spectrum. And in California as a whole, we only had not even 11.5 inches of rain on average, and that's a 126-year low. So that kind of compares similarly to the prior drought, right? So the dry conditions in the West are significant. The Bay Area, for example, also less than 10 inches of rain on average across the Bay Area. And, normally we'll get more on the order of 25 inches or so. So very dry conditions in the West currently. And, what we have seen over the last few years is it seems as though that this is going to look, that our future will look very much like this. We need to be prepared for long periods of dry weather and drought. And we understand that the climate is changing, and this clearly could be something that's in our future. So yeah, I do expect that California and the West will need to continue to work on being more resilient against drought. I think water agencies in the state all recognize that. There's a lot of effort around the state to do a number of things, really, to find ways of using water more efficiently, to work with water users to use water more efficiently. Agriculture has made huge strides in recent years on water use efficiency, and urban areas have made huge strides in water use efficiency. For example, in our service area, which serves the cities of Fremont, Newark, and Union City, our customers are using about 15% less today than they did at the beginning of the last drought. So we're already conserving a whole lot of water, and our water demand projections that go out into out years are far lower today than they had been in the past, because we're seeing that customers really do respond and they really do conserve water, and it's becoming a way of life in California. And I really do think that that's going to be our future.
Well, the less use of water, at least in residential settings and in agricultural settings, is a silver lining on unfortunately, a bit of a grim prediction in terms of water in the Western United States. One thing that a lot of people might not be aware of is where their water actually comes from. I mean, we turn on the tap, water comes out, but in our service district, where does that water come from, and what is the breakdown?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think you're right. I think water is one of those things that people expect to be there 24/7, and it just always is. But there's a whole lot that goes on behind the scenes in making sure that that water is truly available, it's of high quality, and it's there at the tap anytime you need it. So the water that serves the Alameda County Water District service area, we have a diverse portfolio of water supply. So about 40% of our water on an average year, about 40% of that water comes from the Delta, the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. And we're a member of the State Water Project, and we take water from the South Bay Aqueduct, which is an arm off of the State Water Project. And that's the big canal that you see as you drive down Highway 5 that runs down the middle of the state. That serves a good portion of the state and a great deal of the population of the state. So we are, from that aspect, we're a Southern California water agency, right? Because we're south of the Delta. And when it comes to the State Water Project, we are Southern California from that standpoint. So 40% of our water supply comes from the Delta. 20% on average comes from the Hetch Hetchy Regional Water System. So this is Hetch Hetchy Reservoir up in the Sierras and the regional water system that's run by the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. We're a member of BOSCA, which is a group of agencies that all partner with San Francisco in the operation and management of that system. And so that's a very significant part of our water supply. And then the remaining 40% comes from the Alameda Creek Watershed. And the Alameda Creek Watershed, it's a huge watershed, spans 633 square miles from Mount Diablo to Mount Hamilton and out to Altamont Pass. So it's a very big watershed, and that water runoff goes through various tributaries and streams into Alameda Creek. And Alameda Creek is an extremely important resource for ACWD. It's where we source most of the water that we use to recharge the Niles Cone groundwater basin. And so that groundwater basin is a key water resource for ACWD. So our diversity in supplies helps us to better weather dry weather scenarios like we're in now. And the fact that we are diverse with regard to storage that we've banked throughout the state water system, in the semi-tropic groundwater bank, in the valley, and then in our own Niles Cone groundwater basin, really these are real assets to our customers, and really the result of a lot of investment that our customers have done over the years. So a variety of water sources available to our service area.
Nice. That is really fascinating. And it sort of pivots into my next question, which is, even though our district shares a lot of those water resources with a variety of other areas, ACWD is not going to be calling on residents specifically to cut their water use. So I'd love to know if you would be able to elaborate a little bit on how the district managed their water resources so effectively, and what sets it apart from what other districts might be dealing with.
Yeah, that's another great question. And it's another thing that a lot of folks, without a lot of in-depth knowledge, not only about the sources that serve you, but also the sources that serve lots of other agencies, it's hard to distinguish when there are seemingly conflicting messages from one agency to the next. But before I get into that, I just want to mention that ACWD really is calling on our customers to conserve more water this year, and it's likely that we'll be asking our customers to continue to conserve water as we go into next year. And so our message is a little bit different. It's about behavior and it's about action, as opposed to specific percentage numbers. So we've had a campaign underway for some time now called One Saves Water. And really what we're trying to do is send a message to our customers that little things that they do now can really make a big difference. So, one less flush of the toilet actually does make a difference if you're talking about the 356,000 people in our service area. And one less day of watering your outdoor irrigation would make a very significant percentage conservation effect. So we are messaging to our customers that we do want them to conserve. What we've not done is declared a water shortage emergency. And some other agencies have had to do that because they have different sources of supply, and their supplies are impacted differently than ours are. Other agencies have had to take major infrastructure out of service, and that has impacted their ability to serve water to their customers. Other agencies are reliant on a single source that's heavily impacted by dry weather. So they've had to take additional steps. But as mentioned, ACWD has invested in a variety of supplies, and we have banked water. That doesn't mean, though, that our customers everything will be fine if our customers continue to use water at the rates they'd used them, say, last year and prior to the last drought and so forth. We really are relying on our customers to conserve. And the state of California has called for 15% voluntary conservation across the state. And that's as a result of some severe water conditions within the state water project and other areas of the state and water resources within the state. But ACWD certainly supports the state's call for a 15% voluntary conservation. And so we're continuing to adapt our messaging as we find what works best and what we can do to tweak things. And so that's certainly part of our messaging going forward too, is that we're fully in support of the state's call for 15% water conservation.
Nice. So don't slacken just because you live in Alameda County. You still have to work on your water conservation and your water use.
Everybody across the state needs to all do our part.
Nice. And we talked a little bit about this earlier with regards to the future of water in the West. Would you be able to shed some light on how the district plans to adapt the water system due to the threat of climate change?
Yeah, that's a great question. So really, climate change, we expect, will result in a number of potential impacts on our water agency and our customers. So the first sort of obvious impact is a reduction or a change to hydrologic patterns, right? It'll be a change to how precipitation falls on the state and how much snowpack there may be and how water runoff happens that serves the various reservoirs and streams that serve Californians across the state. So we expect that there'll be changes in when water is available and how much availability there is. So we're looking at things like additional water storage, off-stream water storage, to try and ensure that should water runoff patterns change significantly and timing changes significantly, that we've got storage available to be able to continue to serve our customers. Another potential change is the impact that may occur with sea level rise. I mentioned the Niles Cone groundwater basin, which is right up against the San Francisco Bay, right? We're here in the cities of Fremont, Newark, Union City, and we're neighbors to the San Francisco Bay. And so significant changes to the water level within the San Francisco Bay could be expected to have impacts on the Niles Cone groundwater basin, because all that water is connected and below the ground. So we're looking at ways of trying to ensure that seawater intrusion doesn't impact our basin. We're looking at ways of optimizing the operation of our groundwater basin to make sure that it remains healthy, even if that happens. So, but these are some of the sort of larger programmatic and sort of engineering type fixes. But really, I think that water conservation by all Californians will be a big part of the formula for this state and for the West going into the future. I think that's part of the solution.
What are some easy ways that you would recommend for people to do water conservation?
So that's really great, because that's what our whole conservation program is designed around. It's designed around just little easy ways. You know, people don't have to become plumbers. They don't have to become experts in hydrology. They don't have to build massive infrastructure systems to make sure that they're using less water and doing their part. Our program is all about, you know, just doing that one extra little thing, and maybe add an extra little thing on top, right? One less flush of the toilet, one less leak, fewer day watering your lawn or replacing your lawn. with more drought tolerant vegetation and landscaping. Just don't do things like let the water run off your lawn onto the sidewalk and into the gutter as you're irrigating things. Don't wash your sidewalk and your driveway with a hose. And if you're using a hose, you make sure it's got a shut off on it. And these really are simple little things. And I think people would be surprised by how much they can really save water. The state's 15% voluntary water conservation really can be met in many cases simply with a somewhat slight reduction in irrigation, in outdoor irrigation, right? Outdoor irrigation use comprises a whole lot of what people use in terms of water consumption. So our whole program is based around these little behaviors, these little tools. We call them conservation hacks. So on our website, there's a whole list of things that people can do. And there are also programs that we can use to help support people in conserving water. We have a landscape replacement rebate program. We have other ways of assisting customers, financially, but also just with all these tips and ideas as to how that they can really make a difference.
100% agree. When I talk about gray water reuse, a lot of people have misconceptions that you're going to have to spend a huge amount of money and put in very expensive infrastructure, but it can be as easy as like saving your used pasta cooking liquid, or making sure that you're like collecting water that you might have used for something else and then trying to reuse it. So it's simple common sense methods that you might not think make a huge difference, but accumulated over an entire population or an entire region, it really does add up.
Yeah, I think, I almost think that the term gray water needs some rebranding, because I think it sounds drab, it sounds like it's not exciting. But what we found from the last drought is people that they would take their a pot in there when they took a shower, and they'd use that water to water the plants around their home. People came up with lots of water saving hacks during the last drought. And so, yeah, it's simply a way of reusing water and not letting it go to waste, putting it to some beneficial use. And, I think you're right. I don't think it involves, significant infrastructure and things like that. But even the state, I think, has recognized that, small tweaks to home plumbing and things like that can be used to really help with, particularly with that outdoor irrigation demand. I mentioned it's a pretty significant part of what everybody uses around their homes. And so, there are, I think, there's been real work to relax, permit requirements and things like that associated with a gray water system that's a little bit more formal and plumbed and so forth. But even that, as helpful as those are, not something that everybody would need to do. Just use common sense, don't waste the water. And if you have some that you've used for another purpose, go ahead and put it to use for watering those plants.
I need that on a t-shirt. Common sense, don't waste the water. One final question that I had for you is, what's one common misconception that you run into when people are talking about droughts or water conservation?
Well, I think one source of confusion for sure is that messaging that's around people, right? We talked a little bit about that. Some agencies and some entities will really be pushing for one goal, maybe a numerical percentage. Others may not, maybe trying to approach the problem from a different angle. And then when percentages are used, there's different percentages coming in messaging from different agencies, and people sometimes aren't even sure, what agency is actually serving me, and what's my goal and my target and my objective. And that's a big reason why ACWD has been kind of focusing on the behavioral side. So I think that particularly in times of drought like this, when everybody is really trying to do their best, sometimes the messaging and the goals aren't clear to folks. And So we recognize and we try and coordinate with our sister agencies from around the Bay Area and the state with regard to how we can best message as an industry to really help people understand what they can truly do to conserve water. And like we talked about earlier, really conserving water is going to be a way of life in California.
Thank you so much. And that's all the questions that I had for you. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about or you were interested in sharing?
Well, Shreya, I just enjoyed our conversation. I'm on day 12, I think, of my current assignment as general manager, and I look forward to continuing to work with you some more in the future.
Thank you so much. We're really glad to have you.
Nice to be here.